we can go ahead and start this episode off by ripping apart the ocean floor and smoothing it out. We need to go very similarly to what we did the very first episode when I terraformed and just smoothed out that whole island, except this time we can do it underwater, and it's all thanks to that conduit that we got by the end of the last episode. Now, because my primary goal for this area is to build a harbor, a set of docks where large ships can, dock, I need to deepen out a great portion of this ocean floor. It needs to be deep enough for the hulls of these ships to actually pass through reasonably and realistically. Additionally, I'm not too fond of the way that this hole here on this corner sat out so prominently, though I do want to keep the hole. I just want to smooth it into the landscape a bit more realistically. Additionally, though not quite as critical at this stage, I wanted to smooth out the actual shoreline where the terrain meets the water. This is going to end up getting covered up later, but for now I needed to get a good idea for the shape that I wanted my docks to really follow, the contours of this harbor, of this opening. And the last real step of this, what has essentially been a very subtractive and reductive process so far, was just to fill in a bit of these really big, nasty, natural Minecraft holes in the terrain. Those I would be building over and covering up in any case, so I wanted to get them out of the way and have a clean slate, a clean canvas on which to start to design the layout of these docks. If we were to have a look at the product in its current state and revert back and compare, there's a striking difference between the two. You wouldn't think so just looking at it in hindsight. It kind of looks almost natural Minecrafty, but the moment you compare it to where we started, I think we've come a very, very long way, and I'm very happy with the product so far. Because of the large size of this dock area that we're working with, and the fact that it kind of wraps in on itself in excess of 90 degrees, I figured it would be a very good idea just to throw this into a drawing software. I'm using Photoshop, and give a once over. Just a very rough pass, sketching out, trying to figure out how I would fit in some ships with this 90-degree bend with this wraparound dock area. And I really like the idea that I came up with these diagonal piers. It doesn't mean that I have to build the ships diagonally as you see in the sketch here, because building ships diagonally would be very, very difficult. But I think this layout would work great. I did also very quickly add in a couple of structures and very rough pathways. These are definitely not set in stone and will probably change even before the end of this episode. With my rough concept sketch in hand, I could begin to lay out this main retaining wall that would ultimately guide the future shape of the docks and the piers to come. I like the fact that this sketch is very rough, which means I can't really follow it to the T. Therefore, I still allow the Minecraft landscape that I'm building in to determine the shape and size and flow of this large retaining wall. With that in place, I could begin to consider the materiality of this structure. And I chose for the ocean-facing side to be a very stone-heavy structure. It needed to resist waves and water and years of degradation after all. That on top though, I could make a timber platform. This would be raised up away from the water, away from the earth even, and this whole structure acts ultimately as a retaining wall, shielding the city from the ocean. This sense of protection I decided to emphasize a little bit by making the vertical face of this large retaining wall on the city side, on the outside or inside depending on which way you look at it, constructed out of timber rather than the stone. This obviously is a face that would not be exposed to the harsh elements and conditions of the ocean in the face. Thereafter I got distracted filling in a whole lot of landscape, running out of dirt several times and having to go and dig up a mountain somewhere far, far away and return and just keep filling in, and I probably placed a lot more dirt than I needed to for this project. But I did feel that I needed to at the very least get the final level on the inside of the terrain where it meets up with this retaining wall sorted and finalized before I could really fully decorate it. I needed to know how far and how tall and where my pattern variations could be. And guys, at this point I'm already more than 4 hours into building these docks and piers, and I haven't even built the docks or the piers. Grabbing some more spruce wood, I jumped straight into it and I started plotting out first, the main dock that would wrap around and follow the contours of my retaining wall. This I calculated and counted very carefully to make sure that it had the same gradient and the same slope and the same radii and everything that my retaining wall had. It was a bit of a chore, but in the end I think I got a fairly consistent thickness and width for it throughout. Following that, I could begin to plot out the protruding piers, the actual tie-down places for ships where they would line up parallel or next to these, remain docked, and where passengers and or crew could come and go. Here again I had to refer fairly closely to my drawing, though it was a rough drawing, just in order to get my spacing right and my spacing consistent, trying to see roughly where these piers would line up with the terrain and the blocks and things down below. Because I needed the spacing to work, I couldn't have two of these piers too close to one another and then have ships not be able to fit. The very last little bit of detail I needed to do for now was one, to add railings, and to add a way up and down from the lower pier up onto the top of the retaining wall. Obviously you can't jump down and up and swim around, so I've added a series of staircases roughly evenly spaced, though I didn't specifically count these. The staircases on the other end to get from the retaining wall into the city, I'll add as that city gets built down the line. The whole goal of this build is to sort out my storage problem, right? My storage room is overflowing. I've got so many shulker boxes of things everywhere. I really need a place where I can organize and differentiate things, and that's what we're doing. We're building a big storage room. Unfortunately, I had absolutely no idea what kind of shape or size I wanted to go with this structure, so I took a quick screenshot, threw that back into Photoshop and started sketching out. I drew a very rough idea for the crane so that I could have an idea of scale, something to work with, something to work next to, and then I started sketching out based on some very quick Google image searches for dock warehouses, and this is kind of what I came out for. Now the sketch is very rough, it's not my best work, don't judge me on it, but I think I have an idea for size and general shape. The nature of a storage room inevitably results in a large building. What you need for a comfortable space to run around needs to be enlarged significantly to account for the depth of the hundreds of double chests and for the thickness of multi-layer walls. Because of this, I first did a rough layout of a building in a creative testing world, and this, along with my rough sketch, made up the master plan. But what is a plan if not something to deviate from? Using my walling materials, I began to lay out these chests in groups, which would eventually help me to organize this large storage space. And in the floor, I decided I would hide shroom lights, a fairly easy to come by lighting block that wouldn't take up otherwise valuable floor space. Of course, as is becoming a habit in this video, I did have to get distracted with even more terraforming to make room for this absolutely massive building. And while it does end up a lot bigger than I initially anticipated, I think it will do wonderfully, with enough room for future expansion and additions onto its existing hallways. The back of the building, facing to what will eventually become a city, felt far too long and too bland, which led to me kicking one module out by one block. This quite effectively broke this bland wall and provided an opportunity for detail both outside and inside. At this point, the overall layout did begin to resemble a Gothic church, which was an accidental result of the intersecting walkways. Though my future vision for this area would have fantasy religious ties leaning toward the floating monoliths like the sugarcane farm instead of any existing real-world religious figures. Naturally, as the building would expand vertically, more structural elements would be needed, such as the columns along the interior walkways and the heavy beams supporting the roof structure. With the roof, I again returned to my basic drawing for guidance and built 3 parallel hipped roofs along each axis, forming valleys between them. Using the mangrove planks for the roof tiles brought the primary accent color to an otherwise monochromatic build of black and white. Due to the massive scale of the building though, the roof still looked very plain despite the parallel hips and valleys. So I broke it up by adding a central sticky outy bit, which is the technical term for a tower if you didn't know. Unfortunately, this didn't do anything to reduce the overall cathedral appearance of the resulting building. And all of that leaves me with one very empty starter house. I've taken all of the chests out of here, I've taken all of the stuff I had been storing in here out, and we've moved it into our chapel-esque storage room. Now again, the intention was not for it to look like a big church. It's supposed to be kind of a dockyard warehouse, and I'm hoping by adding things around it, we'll get there eventually. Again, I have sorted some stuff out. I've got lots of room for things to expand, where I have not yet found all of the stuff that needs to go in, or I just didn't have the raw resources to specifically populate those, all of that. And I've got an entire wall where I've stored absolutely nothing, and I've planned for absolutely nothing. Really, Rain? Really, Rain. But if you guys want to see me collect all that stuff and, play the game, there is a sister series to this one. This is the Builders Guild. There is a survival series wherein all of the other stuff in between, all of the Minecraft fluff, happens as well. So be sure to subscribe, like, comment, all the wonderful things, and I'll see you guys in the next episode of this and that.